The research vessel Discovery floated silently in the vast darkness of space, its crew of 50 humans conducting routine deep space surveys when the impossible happened. 3 massive silver ships appeared on their sensors, each one twice the size of their own vessel and moving with a grace that defied everything humanity knew about space travel. Captain James Walker stood frozen on the bridge as the alien craft approached. After decades of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe, first contact was happening on his watch. His hands shook slightly as he ordered all stations to prepare for peaceful engagement. "They are sending some kind of signal," reported Communications Officer Tom Bradley, his fingers dancing across his console. "The computer is trying to decode it now." Within minutes, a mechanical voice filled the bridge speaking perfect English. "Greetings, unknown vessels. We are explorers from the Ethereal Collective. We wish to establish peaceful communication." James felt his heart racing as he responded. "This is Captain James Walker of the Earth vessel Discovery. We welcome peaceful contact with your people." The aliens requested permission to board, and James agreed immediately. He ordered his best people to the main docking bay, First Officer Michael Hayes, Chief Engineer Robert Barnes, and their lead scientist Dr. David Thompson. David had insisted on being there, claiming this was the most important scientific moment in human history. As the 3 humans waited in the docking bay, David rolled up the sleeves of his uniform, revealing the elaborate tattoo artwork that covered both his arms. Ocean scenes flowed from his wrists to his shoulders, whales breaching through waves, schools of tropical fish swimming through coral reefs, and an octopus wrapping its tentacles around his forearm. Each piece was a masterwork of color and detail, telling the story of his life spent studying Earth's oceans. A shimmering light filled the center of the bay, and 5 alien figures materialized before them. The humans gasped in amazement. The aliens were tall and slender, standing nearly 7 feet high, with pale skin so translucent that the network of vessels underneath was clearly visible. Their large eyes were opalescent, shifting between silver and blue as they moved. They wore simple white garments that seemed to glow softly. The lead alien stepped forward and spoke through a small device that translated his words instantly. "I am Gila Voss of the Medical Division. We greet you in peace and hope for understanding between our peoples." Michael stepped forward with a warm smile. "Welcome aboard our ship. We're honored to meet you." But Gila Voss was not looking at Michael. His large eyes had fixed on David's exposed arms, and his expression was changing rapidly from curiosity to shock to absolute horror. He began speaking rapidly in his own language, his voice rising with what sounded like panic. The other 4 aliens immediately surrounded David, their eyes wide with alarm. One of them, a female with slightly darker skin, pulled out a scanning device and began running it over David's tattoos while speaking urgently to Gila Voss. "What's wrong?" David asked, looking confused as the aliens continued their frantic examination of his arms. Gila Voss turned to the humans, his translated voice filled with distress. "Your companion has suffered terrible injuries. The scarring patterns indicate severe trauma across both limbs. We must begin immediate medical treatment." David blinked in surprise, then laughed. "Oh no, you don't understand. These aren't injuries or scars. They're tattoos, artwork that I chose to have put on my skin." But the translator seemed to struggle with David's explanation. The alien device rendered his words as something like chosen wound ceremony and ritual scarification for spiritual purposes. This only made the aliens more agitated. 2 more aliens materialized in the bay carrying what appeared to be advanced medical equipment. They began setting up some kind of healing device while speaking rapidly among themselves. "Please, you have to understand," David said, rolling his sleeves up further to show more of his artwork. "These are decorative. I paid an artist to create them. They're beautiful, not painful." The sight of more tattoos, a compass rose on his shoulder and a DNA double helix around his wrist, caused one of the aliens to stagger backward in shock. Another alien rushed to support their colleague, who appeared to be in some kind of distress. Gila Voss approached David with what could only be described as deep compassion. "We understand that your species may have developed psychological mechanisms to cope with such extensive trauma. This self-harm may feel normal to you, but we cannot allow a sentient being to suffer this way." "Self-harm?" Michael said, stepping in. "Doctor, show them your medical records. You're perfectly healthy." But the aliens were not convinced. They continued their scans, documenting every line and color of David's tattoos as evidence of what they believed to be systematic injury. When Robert rolled up his own sleeve to show a small anchor tattoo on his forearm, 2 aliens immediately rushed to examine him as well. The situation was spiraling out of control. What should have been humanity's greatest moment, first contact with an alien species, was turning into a medical emergency based on a fundamental misunderstanding about human body art. James watched from the bay's observation deck as more aliens materialized with additional medical equipment. Through the commotion, he could hear Gila Voss speaking urgently about trauma indicators and species-wide psychological damage. The aliens clearly believed they had discovered a civilization that regularly practiced self-mutilation, and they seemed determined to help whether the humans wanted it or not. Within 2 hours of first contact, the discovery had become a floating medical emergency zone. Gila Voss had declared the situation critical after discovering that 38 members of the human crew displayed what his people considered severe self-inflicted wounds. The aliens had effectively taken control of several sections of the ship, setting up medical stations and conducting what they called trauma assessments on every human they encountered. Captain James Walker found himself trapped in his own ready room with 2 alien medical assistants who refused to let him leave until they had completed their examination of a small eagle tattoo on his chest. The tattoo represented his military service, but the aliens saw only evidence of ritualistic scarring that indicated deep psychological trauma. "Captain, this cannot continue," Gila Voss said as he entered the room, followed by Elder Ross, the senior leader of the alien expedition. "We have documented extensive evidence of systematic self-harm among your crew. The patterns suggest your entire species suffers from a collective psychological disorder that manifests in ceremonial wound-making." James tried to remain calm despite the absurdity of the situation. "With all due respect, Gila Voss, you're completely wrong. These aren't wounds. They are art. Decoration. Humans choose to have these images placed on their skin for personal reasons." Elder Ross spoke for the first time, his voice grave through the translator. "Captain Walker, we have seen species develop such coping mechanisms before. When a civilization experiences severe trauma, individuals often engage in self-harm as a way to feel control over their pain. Your people have simply normalized this behavior across your entire culture." The aliens had divided the crew into what they called severity categories based on the extent of their tattoos. David Thompson was classified as critical condition due to his full sleeves. Chief Engineer Robert Barnes, whose back was covered with a memorial piece honoring his fallen military unit, had caused 3 alien medics to require medical attention when they saw the detailed battle scenes and dates covering his skin. "Look at this evidence," one of the alien medics said, displaying a holographic scan of Robert's tattoos. "Military imagery, death dates, weapons of war. Clearly this individual has suffered severe combat trauma and has marked his body to remember his pain." Robert, who was being held in the medical bay for observation, tried repeatedly to explain that his tattoos were a tribute to friends who had died in service, not a sign of mental illness. But the aliens interpreted his emotional attachment to the artwork as further proof of his psychological damage. The situation grew worse when the aliens discovered Communications Officer Tom Bradley's geometric tattoos covering his arms and chest. The precise mathematical patterns and scientific formulas inked into his skin convinced the aliens that humans use self-harm as a way to remember important information, suggesting a species with severe memory disorders. "They carve knowledge into their flesh because they cannot trust their minds to remember," Elder Ross explained to his team. "This indicates not just psychological trauma, but possible neurological damage as well." Lisa Morgan, whose delicate flower tattoos on her wrists honored her deceased mother, was classified as suffering from grief-induced self-mutilation. The aliens were particularly disturbed by the placement of her tattoos, interpreting the wrist location as evidence of suicide attempts. Dr. Sarah Phillips, the ship's medical officer, found herself in the bizarre position of trying to convince alien doctors that her patients were perfectly healthy. "These people chose their tattoos," she insisted to Gila Voss. "They went to professional artists. They paid money for them. They're proud of them." But Gila Voss shook his head sadly. "Dr. Phillips, we understand that victims of systematic trauma often develop strong attachments to their coping mechanisms. Your professional artists are clearly individuals who exploit the psychological damage of your species for profit. This makes the situation even more tragic." The aliens had established a quarantine zone around the ship and were preparing to contact what they called the Galactic Medical Council for emergency intervention. James learned that there were protocols in place for dealing with species that posed a danger to themselves, including forced medical treatment and protective custody. "You have to understand," James pleaded with Elder Ross, "humans have been creating body art for thousands of years. It's part of our culture, our history. Cave paintings, jewelry, clothing, we've always decorated ourselves." "Captain," Elder Ross replied gently, "we have studied many species. None have engaged in such extensive and systematic scarification of their own bodies. The evidence is overwhelming. Your people are in pain, and we cannot ignore suffering when we encounter it. The aliens began preparing what they called healing chambers, medical devices designed to remove what they saw as scar tissue and repair the damaged skin. They spoke of returning the humans to their natural, unmarked state, and providing psychological counseling to help them overcome their need to harm themselves. David Thompson, still classified as the most severely affected case, watched from the medical bay as aliens wheeled strange machines down the corridor toward his location. "This is insane," he said to Michael Hayes, who was being held in the same area due to a small anchor tattoo on his shoulder. "They're going to try to heal us from our own artwork." The irony was not lost on the crew that humanity's first contact with an alien species was turning into an involuntary medical intervention. The aliens, acting out of genuine compassion and concern, were preparing to save the humans from what they saw as a species-wide epidemic of self-harm, while the humans desperately tried to explain that their tattoos were expressions of beauty, memory, and personal meaning. As more alien medical ships arrived to assist with what Gila Voss had declared a humanitarian crisis, James realized that humanity's future in the galaxy might depend on convincing these well-meaning aliens that sometimes what looks like a wound is actually a work of art. David Thompson sat in the medical bay watching alien technicians set up what looked like advanced healing equipment outside his door. Through the transparent walls, he could see Gila Voss discussing his case with several other medical staff, their translucent faces showing deep concern as they examined holographic displays of his tattoos. Captain James Walker had been trying for hours to negotiate with Elder Ross, but the alien leader remained convinced that humanity needed immediate medical intervention. The situation was growing desperate as more alien ships arrived to assist with what they called the humanitarian crisis. "Wait," David said suddenly to the guard stationed outside his room. "I need to speak with Gila Voss. I have an idea." When Gila Voss arrived, David stood up and faced him directly. "Give me 1 hour," he said. "Let me show you what these really are. Not tell you, show you." Gila Voss tilted his head, his large opalescent eyes studying David carefully. "What do you mean?" "Let me create artwork on one of your people. Something temporary and completely safe. If I can show you the process, maybe you'll understand that this isn't harm, it's creation." The alien medical staff began speaking rapidly among themselves in their own language. David could hear concern and debate in their voices, even without understanding the words. "You wish to perform this, scarification, on one of us?" Gila Voss asked uncertainly. "Not scarification," David said firmly. "Art. Decoration. Something beautiful that tells a story." After much discussion, a young alien scientist named Kes stepped forward. "I volunteer," they said through the translator, their voice carrying a note of curiosity that seemed to surprise the other aliens. David worked with Dr. Sarah Phillips to create a completely safe, temporary bioink using harmless compounds from the ship's medical supplies. The mixture would create visible marks that would fade naturally within a few days without any permanent effects. "This will not hurt," David explained as he prepared his makeshift tattooing tools. "You'll feel only a slight tingling sensation." Kes extended their pale, translucent arm, and David could see the network of vessels beneath their skin pulsing gently with what appeared to be silver blood. He chose a simple design, a spiral galaxy with delicate stars scattered around it, something beautiful but not too complex for his first attempt at alien body art. As David began to work, carefully drawing the first curved line of the galaxy's spiral, he started explaining the stories behind his own tattoos. A crowd of aliens gathered around them, watching with fascination as the design began to take shape on Kes's arm. "This koi fish swimming up my left arm," David said, pausing to show them the colorful artwork on his own skin, "represents my grandmother. She came to my country with nothing and worked her whole life to give her family a better future. The fish swimming upstream symbolizes her determination to overcome every obstacle." The aliens listened intently as David continued working on Kes's galaxy design. Gila Voss leaned closer, his expression shifting from medical concern to genuine curiosity. "The compass rose on my shoulder," David continued, "marks the years I spent in Earth's naval forces, exploring our oceans. It reminds me that no matter how lost I feel, I can always find my way home." "And this?" asked Kes, pointing to the DNA double helix wrapped around David's wrist. David smiled as he added delicate stars to the galaxy on Kes's arm. "That celebrates my life as a scientist. Every discovery, every moment of understanding how life works, it's all represented in those twisted strands." As the temporary tattoo neared completion, something remarkable happened. Other aliens began asking questions about David's artwork, not as medical professionals examining injuries, but as individuals curious about the stories and meanings behind each image. "You chose these marks?" Kes asked, staring in wonder at the galaxy now decorating their arm. "Each one has meaning that is personal to you." "Exactly," David said, putting the finishing touches on the design. "They're as unique as the person wearing them. No two humans have identical tattoos because no two humans have lived identical lives." Elder Ross approached the group, his ancient eyes studying the temporary galaxy on Kes's arm. "This is artistic expression," he said slowly, as if the concept was difficult to grasp. "Individual artistic expression permanently marked on the body." "Well, in Kes's case, temporarily marked," David laughed. "But yes, that's exactly what it is." The change in the aliens' behavior was immediate and profound. Where before they had seen evidence of trauma and self-harm, they now saw something entirely different, a form of art that was completely foreign to their culture but undeniably beautiful. "In our society," Elder Ross explained, "individual expression has long been discouraged. Our translucent skin evolved to make deception impossible. We cannot hide our emotions or thoughts from others. Over time, this led us to value collective harmony above personal uniqueness." More aliens began approaching David, asking if they could also receive temporary designs. A medical technician wanted something that represented their love of healing others. A ship engineer asked for geometric patterns that reflected their fascination with technology. Even some of the senior staff members expressed interest in experiencing this strange human art form. As David worked on his second temporary tattoo, a simple flower design for a young alien who admired Earth's plant life, Healer Voss sat down beside him. "We have made a terrible error," the healer said quietly. "We saw wounds where there was beauty. We saw pathology where there was meaning. Your marks are not evidence of damage, they are declarations of identity." The medical equipment that had been prepared to heal the humans was quietly dismantled as more and more aliens requested temporary tattoos, each one eager to experience what it felt like to carry a personal story on their skin. The transformation aboard the Discovery was nothing short of extraordinary. Within hours of David's first demonstration, nearly every alien on the ship had requested their own temporary tattoo. The medical bay had been converted into an impromptu art studio, with David working alongside several crew members to create designs for their new alien friends. Kes stood before a mirror, turning their arm to catch the light on their spiral galaxy tattoo. The design seemed to shimmer against their translucent skin, creating an effect that was both alien and beautiful. "I have never seen myself as an individual before," Kes said quietly to David. "In our culture, we are taught that standing out from others is dangerous. But this mark, it makes me feel like I have my own story to tell." Elder Ross approached David with slow, deliberate steps. The ancient alien leader had been watching the activities from a distance, his large eyes taking in every detail as his people experienced something completely new. "Dr. Thompson," he said, "I must share something with you that may help you understand why this discovery is so profound for my people." David paused in his work on a temporary tattoo for a young alien engineer and gave Elder Ross his full attention. "Thousands of years ago," Elder Ross began, "our people practiced what we called soul marking. It was an ancient art where individuals would mark their skin with symbols that represented their personal journeys, their achievements, their losses, and their dreams. Each mark told a story that was unique to that person." The elder's voice grew sad through the translator. "But as our civilization advanced, we began to value uniformity over individuality. Our leaders believed that personal expression led to division and conflict. The practice of soul marking was gradually discouraged, then forbidden, and finally forgotten. We convinced ourselves that such individual displays were primitive and harmful." David listened with growing amazement as Elder Ross continued his story. "Our translucent skin evolved as a survival mechanism on our homeworld, where deception could mean death in the harsh environment. But over time, this inability to hide our emotions led us to suppress individual feelings entirely. We became a people who valued collective harmony above all else, but in doing so, we lost something essential about ourselves." Other aliens had gathered around to listen to Elder Ross speak. Many of them were sporting temporary tattoos created by David and his crew, geometric patterns, star charts, simple flowers, and abstract designs that seemed to glow softly against their pale skin. "When we saw your tattoos," Elder Ross said to David, "we interpreted them through our own fear. We saw individual expression as evidence of psychological damage because we had trained ourselves to believe that standing out from the group was a sign of illness or trauma." Healer Voss stepped forward, his own temporary tattoo, a delicate pattern representing healing and medicine, visible on his forearm. Our medical protocols are designed to identify species that harm themselves. We have encountered civilizations where self-injury was a response to extreme trauma. But we fail to recognize that what you call tattoos are not wounds at all, they are declarations of self. The revelation continued as more aliens shared their thoughts about this unexpected cultural exchange. The engineer with the geometric tattoo explained that seeing personal symbols on their skin awakened feelings they had never been allowed to explore. The young scientist with the flower design spoke of dreams and aspirations that had been suppressed by their society's demand for conformity. "You have given us permission to be individuals," Kes said to David. "For the first time in our lives, we are experiencing what it feels like to choose something that reflects who we are as unique beings, not just members of a collective." But the most surprising revelation came when Elder Ross made an unprecedented request. "Dr. Thompson, I wish to ask something that goes against everything my people have believed for millennia. I want you to create a permanent mark on my skin, one that will remain visible even beneath our translucent flesh." The request shocked the other aliens into silence. Permanent body modification had been forbidden in their culture for thousands of years. Elder Ross was not just asking for a tattoo, he was asking to revive a lost tradition that had been banned by his own ancestors. "Are you certain?" David asked, understanding the gravity of what Elder Ross was proposing. "This would be irreversible." Elder Ross nodded slowly. "I am the senior leader of this expedition. If I am willing to carry a permanent mark, it will send a message to my entire civilization that individual expression is not something to be feared, but something to be celebrated." David worked carefully, using a special permanent ink that would remain visible under the alien's translucent skin. The design he created was simple but profound, two intertwined spirals representing the meeting of their two species, surrounded by small symbols that told the story of this historic first contact. As the permanent tattoo took shape on Elder Ross's arm, other aliens watched in fascination and growing excitement. Several of them began discussing the possibility of reviving the ancient art of soul marking on their homeworld. "This changes everything," Gila Voss said quietly. "We came here believing we had discovered a species that needed our help to heal from trauma. Instead, you have helped us heal from our own trauma, the loss of our individual identities." The aliens began sharing stories of dreams and aspirations they had kept hidden for years, afraid to express anything that might make them stand out from their peers. The temporary tattoos had become catalysts for a cultural awakening that none of them had expected. David realized that what had started as a simple misunderstanding about human body art had evolved into something far more significant, the rediscovery of a lost alien culture and the beginning of a friendship between two species that would change both civilizations forever. The main docking bay of the Discovery had been transformed into something resembling an art gallery mixed with a diplomatic ceremony. Representatives from both species gathered together as Captain James Walker and Elder Ross prepared to sign what would become known throughout the galaxy as the First Interspecies Cultural Exchange Protocol. David Thompson stood beside Elder Ross, admiring the permanent tattoo he had created on the alien leader's arm. The two intertwined spirals representing their species' first meeting glowed softly beneath Ross's translucent skin, creating an effect that was both beautiful and historically significant. It was the first permanent body art created on an ethereal in over 3,000 years. "Dr. Thompson," Elder Ross said, "before we conclude our time together, I wish to share with you an ancient art that my people abandoned long ago. Consider it our gift to humanity in exchange for helping us rediscover our lost heritage." The elder alien produced a small container filled with what appeared to be glowing liquid. "This is bioluminescent paint made from organisms native to our homeworld. When applied to living skin, it responds to the electrical impulses of the body and creates patterns that shift with emotion and thought." David watched in fascination as Elder Ross began applying the glowing substance to his shoulders and upper arms. The liquid seemed to come alive as it touched his skin, spreading in flowing patterns that pulsed with a gentle blue light. The sensation was warm and tingling, unlike anything David had ever experienced. "This art form was practiced alongside soul marking in our ancient culture," Elder Ross explained as he worked. While permanent marks told the stories of the past, light painting showed the beauty of the present moment, the living spirit expressing itself through color and movement. As Elder Ross completed the design, David looked down at his arms in amazement. The bioluminescent patterns flowed like living rivers of light across his skin, pulsing gently with his heartbeat and shifting color as his emotions changed from curiosity to wonder to joy. Other crew members gathered around to watch the ceremony. Communications Officer Tom Bradley, whose mathematical tattoos were now complemented by equations that glowed and pulsed with soft golden light, stood beside the young ethereal scientist Kess, whose temporary galaxy tattoo seemed to echo the real stars visible through the bay's large viewports. Chief Engineer Robert Barnes had tears in his eyes as he looked at his memorial tattoos, now enhanced with flowing streams of silver light that seemed to honor his fallen comrades in a new way. The bioluminescent additions didn't replace his original artwork but added a living dimension that made the memorial feel more alive than ever. "This is incredible," Lisa Morgan whispered as she watched the delicate flower patterns on her wrists glow with soft pink light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her breathing. "It's like the tattoos are alive." Gila Voss approached Captain Walker with a container of the bioluminescent paint. "Captain, if you will permit me, I would be honored to add this traditional ethereal art to your military tattoo." James nodded and removed his shirt, revealing the eagle tattoo on his chest that had caused so much confusion during first contact. As Voss carefully applied the glowing paint around the eagle design, the captain felt a sense of history being made. The permanent tattoo representing his military service was now enhanced with flowing patterns of light that seemed to make the eagle appear ready to take flight. "In our ancient tradition," Voss explained as he worked, "the combination of permanent soul marks and living light painting represented the complete individual, their past achievements and their present spirit united in one artistic expression." The ceremony reached its climax when both leaders signed the historic agreement. The protocol established formal procedures for cultural exchange between species, with David officially appointed as humanity's first ambassador for xenological arts. The document also outlined plans for ethereal artists to visit Earth and human artists to travel to the ethereal homeworld. "This agreement represents more than diplomatic relations," Elder Ross announced to the gathered crowd. "It marks the beginning of a new era for my people. We will return to our homeworld not just with news of humanity's existence, but with permission to rediscover our own individual identities." Kess stepped forward, their temporary galaxy tattoo still clearly visible on their pale arm. "Elder Ross, I formally request permission to make this marking permanent when we return home. I wish to be among the first of our people to revive the ancient practice of soul marking." The request sent ripples of excitement through the ethereal delegation. Several other young aliens immediately voiced similar desires, eager to carry permanent reminders of this historic encounter and their newfound understanding of individual expression. "The request is granted," Elder Ross said with what could only be described as pride. "When we return home, we will establish schools to teach both the ancient art of soul marking and the human techniques we have learned here." As the two fleets prepared for departure, the docking bay filled with emotional farewells. Humans and ethereals who had been strangers just days before now embraced as friends, their skin glowing with combinations of permanent tattoos and bioluminescent art that told the story of their meeting. David stood at the viewport watching the ethereal ships prepare to depart, their silver hulls gleaming in the starlight. His own skin still glowed with the flowing patterns Elder Ross had painted on him, a living reminder of this extraordinary encounter. "You know what's amazing?" Tom Bradley said as he joined David at the viewport, his mathematical equations still pulsing with golden light. "We almost had an interstellar incident over tattoos, and instead we ended up giving an entire alien civilization permission to be individuals again." David smiled as the ethereal ships began to move away, carrying dozens of aliens who now sported temporary tattoos alongside their traditional bioluminescent art. "Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we stop trying to fix what isn't broken and start appreciating what makes us different." The Discovery and the ethereal fleet departed in opposite directions, both carrying crews forever changed by the understanding that art, in all its forms, truly was the universal language that connected all living beings across the cosmos.